Today, on the report, the New York City bike path killer avoids death penalty.
Also, Biden's executive order to strengthen gun background checks and the U.S. plan in providing Australia with nuclear submarines.
Plus, the California court upholds Proposition 22.
And Chevron's non-compliance with California's gas laws. The report starts now. Hello, I'm Alexis Ray.
I'm Noah Sakatis.
I am Elmira Darmanian.
And I'm Shelby Martin. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at The Report CSUF or on our Titan TV Instagram at Titan TV CSUF to keep in touch with us and view all of our new content.
On Monday, Saifullah Saipov, a 35-year-old Islamic extremist, was sentenced to life in prison without parole after jurors were unable to reach a unanimous decision.
Saipov was responsible for racing a rented U-Haul truck into cyclists and pedestrians along a New York bike path back in October of 2017.
The incident killed 8 people and maimed several others. The victims consisted of 5 tourists from Argentina, a woman from Belgium, and 2 American citizens.
In the aftermath of the killings, Saipov pledged allegiance to ISIS and claimed he would have killed more people if he hadn't crashed the vehicle into a nearby school bus. Saipov was wounded by police upon exiting the vehicle and subsequently arrested wielding a pellet gun and paintball gun in his possession.
Earlier this year, Saipov was convicted of charges including murder in aid of racketeering, violence and destruction of a motor vehicle, and supporting a terrorist organization.
Saipov's trial has been the first death penalty trial to occur under the Biden administration, and since taking up office, the president has worked diligently towards abolishing the federal capital punishment.
Had Saipov been sentenced to death, his execution would have been the first in 60 years by the state of New York since that of Eddie Lee Mays in 1963.
According to his attorneys, Saipov is expected to serve his life sentence in a maximum security prison in Florence, Colorado, where he will remain in solitary confinement 22 hours a day. Now, of course, Saipov showed no signs of regret for his actions. Do you think the outcome of life in prison was justified in this case, rather than the death penalty?
I mean, if he felt no remorse for his actions, I feel like there's this argument that the death penalty kind of gives people a way out versus having to sit there and live with their actions. So, you know, for as long as he'll be in prison, he will have to think about that. And it is unfortunate that he didn't feel any remorse for those actions. So who's to say that, you know, spending all that time thinking about that will actually allow him to reflect and feel guilty about what he did? It's a very gray area, for sure.
What I'm thinking is I am for sure against death penalties because, first of all, as one of your arguments was that it is like kind of a way out for people rather than just suffering in jail their whole life. I would say that a person, like a normal human being, no matter if it's a jury, no matter it's just like if it's a murderer themselves, I don't think anybody should have a choice of killing another human being.
Absolutely, because
so yeah, if you end up as a jury, end up making a choice of like murdering another person, how are you different from them?
We're basically playing God at this point,
yeah,
deciding
that's not
who lives
what
or
we're
dies.
Supposed to do.
No,
yeah, that's what I think.
I'm kind of in between because I did do a little bit of research on like the pros of death penalty, the cons of death penalty, and one thing between the two factors is the money cost, because essentially death penalty is a little bit cheaper than life imprisonment. So I don't know about that because it is coming out of pocket, but I don't know. I don't think anyone deserves to die, no matter how severe their actions were.
You all bring up some really great points. Do you believe the death penalty then should be abolished on a federal level, or should the states have the right to make that decision themselves, whether or not to?
I think it should just be removed because nobody everywhere in the world. I might be delusional, but just having death penalties, as I've said, from the perspective of a religious person, I don't think anybody should have a choice of whether keeping someone else alive or murdering them. This is just not normal on a level of another human being. Once again, how are you different then from the murderer yourself? Like, there is no difference. That's what I think.
Eye for an eye.
Yeah. Eye for an eye is going to be if you actually kill them. But I don't think we should. I don't think we should make these choices, even though we're not the ones making them, the juries are. But I don't think a human being should be capable of having a decision whether or not to kill someone else.
Well, those who live by the sword die by the sword too.
Yeah.
See, for me, I'm kind of in between because some people really do some heinous, like
That's
disgusting crimes, especially when involving children. So that, it just brings up rage thinking about some of those crimes. But I guess I can agree with you guys, but I do feel like the different states should have a choice of whether they want to include death penalty or not. But of course, we need further discussions on that one. With the country facing a rise in gun violence with too many high-profile mass shootings, there has been constant talk on the creation of laws related to gun control.
On Tuesday, March 14th, President Biden signed an executive order to strengthen background checks to buy guns. Biden's efforts to form a solution to such violence has gone on since last summer when he signed a law known as the first major gun safety legislation that has passed in decades.
Though the bill included funding for school safety and state crisis intervention programs, it failed to ban any weapons. As president, Biden has limited power to implement such legislation.
John Feinblatt, president of Everytown for Gun Safety, commented, quote, President Biden's executive order today is a home run for public safety, end quote.
According to Everytown for Gun Safety, California is the #1 state when it comes to gun safety policies. However, pro-gun groups believe the president's executive order would not have prevented recent mass shootings. So, guys, what do you think would fix this issue with mass shootings?
I don't think the only thing that might fix the issue with massive gun shootings is the fact that we should tighten up the laws. We've been filming for 3 months now, and every single episode we talk about gun shootings. Isn't it crazy? And every time we say the same thing, we should tighten up and restrict the laws. But there are some people, when I heard about, I didn't even know that a pro-gun community existed. Are those people who are like for the guns?
Yes.
Yeah,
In
that's
America,
crazy. I don't want to be evil, and I don't want to say anything against anyone's opinion, but that's not real.
I can kind of speak to the pro-gun movement because I have a lot of friends that I've been speaking to about the issue. The problem here is that the politicians want to get rid of assault rifles, and the problem is that assault rifles are not committing the most deaths. It's actually handguns, and a lot of people are not willing, in California especially, to get rid of handguns because they carry weapons on themselves, especially in poverty-stricken communities where crime is rampant. People, they have the strap on them at all times. And for the point about California's gun legislation, I've been to a gun range before. The only real enforcement that they have is they put a fin, like a rubber fin on the back of the grip of the rifle that prevents you from firing faster. The problem is that a point that a lot of pro-gun movements use is who is following that law? If you're going to commit a crime, why would you have that fin on? You can take it off very easily. So the only people that are being affected by these gun laws are people that are abiding the law. You know, criminals are not going to do that. So that's the problem here.
That's true. They're going to find guns anyway, but it's just like I'm saying we need to make guns and any kind of rifles less accessible to people.
Absolutely. And it also definitely depends on the states because, you know, as someone who has been to states in various parts of the country, you know, there are a lot of areas where it's so easy to buy a gun. It's very accessible. I mean, there are stores you can walk into where someone could literally say they'd come in with a minor or someone who's about 18, and I've literally seen this happen where someone can walk into the store and say, "Oh yeah, we want to buy a gun. How old is he? He's 18. Oh, he has to be 21. Okay, then I'll just get it." And you know, people behind the counter won't really bat an eye, or you know, just it's so easy for someone to access it, and the certain checks that different states do vary, and some of them don't have the same restrictions that other ones do. So it could be easier for someone to say, get a gun in one state and bring it over to another. So that's another thing too. It's more about the accessibility, excuse me.
Well, that is also like a federal crime though, like bringing a rifle over to another state. Like you can't just do that. But like, you're right that people do they? Like Kyle Rittenhouse, for example.
There
like
are so many
did
rules that people don't obey and don't listen to. We can't just restrict everyone, but we can try though.
I mean, if an 18-year-old mentally ill teenager can easily access a gun, that's a problem.
You're absolutely right. I think you all bring up some terrific points, and I think we're just going to honestly have to wait and see what happens. On Monday, President Biden announced Australia will be purchasing nuclear-powered submarines from the U.S.
Biden met with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese in San Diego, California, to further discuss the plan.
The partnership between the three countries, originally announced back in September of 2021, has been dubbed AUKUS, which has stipulated Australia's access to nuclear-powered submarines.
Australia's purchase of U.S. submarines will be the first time in 65 years that the United States has shared nuclear propulsion technology, and second time in history ever doing so.
Compared with traditional submarines, nuclear-powered submarines are quieter, harder to detect, and able to remain beneath the surface much longer than their counterparts.
The purchase aims to modernize Australia's fleet amid growing concerns over China's recent activities and influence in the Indo-Pacific region. Still pending congressional approval, Australia will buy up to 5 Virginia-class boats that will be delivered by the late 2030s.
Development of Australia's own nuclear-powered submarines is expected to begin in the early 2040s and will be modeled after Royal Navy designs while equipped with state-of-the-art U.S. military technology.
In response to the pending purchase, China has criticized AUKUS for violating the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which deals in preventing the spread of nuclear weapons to non-nuclear states.
Mao Ning, a foreign ministry spokesperson for China, stated in a daily briefing, quote, "We urge the U.S., Britain, and Australia to abandon the Cold War mentality and zero-sum game, faithfully fulfill their international obligations, and do more to contribute to regional peace and stability," end quote.
President Biden has assured the public that submarines are only nuclear-powered and will not carry any WMDs of any kind.
Should the U.S. be providing Australia with nuclear-powered submarines? And if so, are there tools the United States shouldn't be providing to other countries out of fear of a response from China or Russia?
I think that nuclear-powered submarines is something so broad, and I'm trying to make my point. I don't think the U.S. should be providing in any countries that are the owners of nuclear weapons should provide them to other states, the ones who don't own them. Because when you have a nuclear weapon and you own it, it's your whole responsibility. So how are you going to trust someone that much that, for example, that they're not going to use it against you? You're giving someone such a big privilege. Maybe I'm wrong. What do you guys think about it?
Honestly, I researched it and I don't really see a problem with it because essentially Australia is paying for the submarine. So it's not like the U.S. is fully coming out of pocket or losing money from my understanding. So I don't see a problem with it. But my main point is, what sign does this send to China? If we're constantly prepping and stuff like that, it's kind of like China's probably like, okay, they're getting ready, so we need to double up on what we have, and we don't need that at all.
We don't need
Let's not give them an incentive.
No, please. Please don't.
Now, there are worries the plan to provide Australia with the submarines will be costly and could run into problems with future administrations if Joe Biden, say, has a one term and then another president comes in. Does this plan seem successful, and what are some other problems that you think might be encountered?
I think we discussed it. There are going to be, as you mentioned, there are not going to be a lot of problems, especially if we're talking about money. Mm-hmm. Anything can happen while the leaders are changing, I think. So there's no guarantee that what we say is going to happen or is not going to happen. I feel like it's 50-50, but I don't think that this specific situation will be an issue when it comes to changing leaders.
Yeah, I agree.
You guys make some really excellent points, and I am definitely curious to see where this story goes. One of the most discussed propositions back in the 2020 election was Prop 22, a ballot initiative in California which became law following the election.
Prop 22 granted app-based transportation and delivery companies such as Uber and DoorDash an exception to Assembly Bill 5 by classifying their drivers as independent contractors rather than employees.
This past Monday, California's First District Court of Appeals upheld the decision to keep those working within these companies as contractors.
Despite not being considered an employee, Prop 22 has several provisions that grants app-based workers the ability to access benefits such as health insurance.
The Protect App-Based Drivers and Services Coalition stated, quote, "Today's ruling is a historic victory for nearly 1.4 million drivers who rely on the independence and flexibility of app-based work to earn income," end quote.
The lower court decision that found the proposition unconstitutional mentioned its impact on the state's workers' compensation law. Judge Frank Roche found that provision in Prop 22 violated that law. So, do you guys think it's better for drivers to be labeled as independent contractors or employees?
I think that because they are sort of working on their own schedule, I mean, Uber is kind of like a privatized service in a way, even though it's not really, because you're basically working on your own schedule, you're picking people up, you're a chauffeur that just happens to be employed. But it makes sense to put them as independent contractors, especially because they're kind of, working on their own terms.
I would say that labeling them as independent contractors will also give them some benefit. Rather saying that you're an employee, you're saying that you're an independent contractor. And I think that Uber it gives like benefits in a sense of like being independent and kind of away and having your own schedule, as you've mentioned, and doing like not whatever you want, but most of the time putting your needs in the preference.
I think the problem with labeling Uber drivers and DoorDash as well as private contractors is it means that as you're not an employee, you don't have to abide by California state regulations, which means that you can technically underpay those people because if you do Uber, you're being sent commissions like as you drive. So the app doesn't have to send you that baseline, for what everybody else in California is working. So you could be essentially working at poverty level.
That also brings up a few points about abiding by certain laws and rules. When you think about it, I mean, when you're an independent contractor, do you still have to follow the safety guidelines of the Uber app? Is it going to be harder to report a driver who's maybe not the most comfortable person to be in a car with? That's an important thing to know too.
Yeah, I think the sole decision relies with the individual doing the work, but there are vast differences between an employee and independent contractor. I mean, employees can join the union, independent contractors can't.
Right.
Independent contractors can work for different companies, even our competitors at the same time, whereas employees can only solely work for the company they're under. Employees also get paid time off, whereas independent contractors, you're not getting sick leave or paid time off, so you really have to manage your time and figure out, how you're receiving your money and managing life, essentially.
I think whoever is looking for a job definitely has an option to make a choice, whether to be an independent contractor or an employee.
For sure.
Commuters are no longer using the metro rail system as much as they used to.
In Los Angeles, since the pandemic heightened, drug overdose and crime have become frequent issues for riders.
Even after the addition of the new $2.1 billion Crenshaw line, there are fewer than 2,100 average weekday boardings in a month.
Well, the Crenshaw line is a crime hotspot. Few stations can compare to the MacArthur Park Westlake station that resides next to an open-air drug market dating back decades.
It estimates 22,000 boarders daily. Between November and January, there were 26 medical emergencies at the station, and last year 6 deaths and 1 shooting were reported by the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Authority.
According to local police reports, the area is also gang-controlled with drug vendors who pay gang taxes to sell in their territory.
The transit agency head of security has said that she plans to propose to 13 board members, including Mayor Karen Bass, to expand the agency forth with 200 in-house transit officers and armed officers. Do you think that the solution they came up with is going to help in any way? Adding officers, armed ones, and the other ones?
Well, I think it sounds like a fine idea for Los Angeles, especially with like the massive crime rate and drug problem that they've been having. But I just don't think that the city of LA is going to. I mean, they haven't in the past. They've really shunned this issue, which has been growing for years. I mean, you have the fentanyl issue in Los Angeles, the growing homeless crisis, and in the past they've done nothing. And so why would they start now? That's the question.
I mean, they're starting. There's nothing to complain about. I think that is a good idea.
So much to complain about.
Yeah.
Do you want to get on a metro train right now with like the way it is right now?
Not right now,
Absolutely
but
not.
if they
Especially
add
as
the
a young
solution.
woman, Absolutely
Exactly.
not.
But if they add the solution to the problem, there's nothing to complain about. Just give it time and then it's going to resolve. Not by itself, obviously, but
Yeah, taking it back, I remember when I was in high school and I took the metro a couple times with my friends to go home, and we would see like patrolling officers getting on, exiting. Some of them even stayed on the train routes with us. So, I mean, I felt a lot more comfortable seeing them, so I can't complain there. But we also have to take into the account police brutality and racial injustice. You know, there's been so many complaints of Black and Latino riders, you know, just complaining about all the things they go through with these police officers, you know, just coming at them crazy while they're just trying to get to where they're going. So I think we need to dive deeper into that and maybe just analyze these officers to make sure we're putting the right ones in these metro stations.
And that is exactly why the city of Los Angeles is fearful of enacting these kind of like patrols, you know, putting law enforcement on trains because they're afraid of the bounce back from locals and that issue of police brutality. It's always on their mind.
There are a lot of pieces. I look forward to seeing what comes next, and I hope that at some point we can find a solution for this. Chevron continues to be non-compliant with California Senate Bill 1322, passed in August of 2022.
The bill enacted the California Oil Refinery Cost Disclosure Act, which requires gas refineries within the state to provide a report that clearly displays the company's gross refining margin to see activities within their gas production.
The deadline for oil companies to disclose the required information was March 2nd, and Chevron has yet to come forth with any information.
The delay created by Chevron is forcing state regulators to fine Governor Gavin Newsom's administration as the nation's first penalty for excessive oil profits.
As of now, Chevron has only provided a small fraction of what the commission requires refineries to report. The company is being given a one-day extension but will face a $2,000 per day fine if nothing changes.
Yes.
So, thoughts? Should there be a fine against Chevron for missing this deadline?
I definitely think they should. I mean, we've seen this time and time again with these Fortune 500 companies not reporting all their accurate data, you know, trying to hide some money on the side or here from their employees or from paying higher taxes. So I definitely agree with fining them for sure.
You know, I'm not very versed in oil company politics, but so I don't understand really why this is an issue for Chevron to not just release their margins. I mean, also, to be blunt, $2,000 is really nothing to these companies, so they can keep hiding this information. My question, though, is why?
Absolutely, and that leads me to my next question. Is this information important to disclose to the public?
I mean, if they're hiding it, it's obviously important at some point. I just think that the companies are always going to do what is the most helpful way for their own companies. In a sense, you know what I mean? They're going to hide it if it needs to be hidden.
Yeah.
Not opening the information in their favor. Yeah, if you
Right.
You're right.
And when we talk about ethics of situations like these, it's important to bring up the difference between privacy and secrecy. And it's known that privacy is something that, you know, it's meant to protect information that the public doesn't have a right to know, doesn't need to know, and won't necessarily benefit or, you know, in this case, be harmed by not knowing the information. Yeah. Versus secrecy, it's hiding something that, you know, the public could benefit from knowing, or at least that the public should be aware of, as it does affect them in some way or another. So I think, you know, establishing that fine line is really imperative to these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
I think the oil company is able to get away with this kind of thing in this day and age because of the massive oil problem that we have in the world right now. I mean, we have the war in Ukraine, the pipeline in the North Sea that was destroyed. You have a massive want all over the world for oil in specific areas. And so I think right now more than ever, and with this administration's willingness to kind of remove oil companies and ban fracking, I think the companies are less willing to work with the government right now more than ever before.
Yeah, and then, but here's my thing. As Chevron consumers, I feel like the public should know. I mean, I am all for keeping some things private, as Shelby was saying, to keep down the uprise and the outbreak of just public craziness. But I think for here, the public does deserve to know. I mean, we're the ones
Absolutely.
that have made Chevron rich just because we're buying gas all the time. So I think they should, let us know about that.
Yeah, as consumers, we deserve to know.
Freedom of information.
For sure. And with that, that's all we have time for today.
Have a great week, everyone.
And stay tuned for more news, views, and info.
We'll see you next time on The Report.